Hey guys, Bobby Thompson here. I wanted to take a few minutes to do a more in-depth look at the 1986 Challenger explosion. There's some really good stuff out there, but there's some different pieces floating around that I wanted to put together in one piece. And at the end of this, I did some overlays that I haven't seen done before on a side-by-side. So I just wanted to add that and kind of put everything in one piece where you could see everything. So let's go ahead and get started, and we'll start with the piece that Dave Murphy did, allegedly Dave. So let's start with that. Only take a few minutes.
In 1986, the shuttle Challenger exploded about 74 seconds after takeoff, killing all 7 astronauts inside. Or did it? It turns out that 6 of the 7 are still alive and kicking today. Ellison Onizuka claims to be his identical twin brother, Claude. Yeah, I've got an identical twin brother, Claude, too. The Challenger pilot, Mickey Smith, hasn't even bothered changing his name. He's now Professor Michael J. Smith of University of Wisconsin. Now, Krista McAuliffe was a bit of a sneaky one. She was the Challenger payload specialist, quite famous for being a teacher. It turns out, during her astronaut days, she was using her middle name, Krista. And now she goes by her first name, Sharon. The Challenger commander, Francis Richard Scobie, is now Dick Scobie, which sounds like a rather unpleasant disease. Judith Resnick, the Challenger mission specialist, again hasn't even bothered changing her name. She's a professor at Yale Law. And finally, Ronald McNair, another Challenger mission specialist, claims to be his identical twin brother, Carl.
Okay, so you look at something like that and you're thinking, well, they look pretty similar, but there could be other explanations. Let's take a look here at.
Last thing anybody wants now is an emergency.
So let's look at how this could happen, right? So this is from an old BBC broadcast. I don't know what year this was released, but there's an escape chute that leaves the Challenger, that the astronauts can just zip down underground to the safety of a bunker. So let's watch this.
Last thing anybody wants now is an emergency. But like everything else, they're ready for that too.
Once the crew are on board, if it looks as if they're in danger, they get out and head down this tube, specially insulated against fire, and zigzagging down not to some point out and away from the rocket, but to an escape room exactly where you'd think it shouldn't be. Three and a half minutes after they get the warning in the capsule, the crew could be down here in the blast escape room via that 200-foot escape tube, 40 feet below the base of the rocket. They find themselves in a totally rubber room, walls and floors, and they head for safety through a 6-inch steel door. Once they're behind that door, it doesn't matter what comes down this tube behind them. On this side of that door, the rarely seen blast escape room itself.
So we don't have to let the whole thing play. I think you get the idea here. There's obviously a way to escape. You can see them board the rocket, and they have the option to exit the rocket. So what's that mean? Let's go a little bit further. Here's an overlay I did of Krista McAuliffe, and this isn't the best one. I'm kind of presenting my weakest evidence first, but let's look how the overlay works out. Just kind of some, couldn't find an exact photo. There was only a handful of photos out there for the Krista McAuliffe of today. But let's look at how the teeth and nose and eyes and jawbone and everything lines up. I mean, it's almost an identical overlay, almost a perfect fit. So again, to me, this is the weaker of the evidences, starting with. All right, so let's move on from Krista McAuliffe and let's look at Dick Scobie. Got the same messed up eyes. Now I had to flop the photo. I had to invert the photo, the NASA photo, to match the angle. So even doing that, you can see that it's still almost a perfect overlay, right? So the lazy eye on the right becomes the lazy eye on the left. So but still, you can see he's you know, looks like the same person to me. All right, let's move on to Ellison Onzuka and his identical twin Claude. And you can see the jawline here. If you watch the jawline, the eyes line up exactly. Pupils line up, everything lines up. And watch his teeth. This is the most important part. The teeth are even the you know, the incisor, everything. It is a perfect overlay of the teeth. Got a pretty good angle on that photo. It was almost the same angle. He obviously put on some weight if it's the same guy. All right, let's look at Michael J. Smith. Not quite the same angle. Again, can't find exact, exact angle, so I had to work with what I get. But watch the teeth. Watch the gum line. You know, it's almost perfect. I would say it is perfect. You can't even see any change whatsoever. The eyes got the same, everything, the pupils match, everything lines up identically, right? We got a lot of different shaped heads out there and facial features, but I would say this is the same guy if it were me. It's a perfect overlay. All right, now here I'm going to play a different clip. In Germany,
now in 1986,
sorry about that. In Germany, someone in Germany did an expose, and I'm going to forward to that. This is another guy doing it, but I find it interesting that there's there's people all around the world doing these exposés on the Challenger. I'm going to let them play because they've pointed out some things that might have been missed in Dave's video or what I pointed out, and I think the most interesting thing is the voice comparison towards the end.
Alle 7 Besatzungs, all 7 crew members were killed, einschließlich der 5 NASA astronauts and the 2 payload specialists. Millions of Americans, 17% of the total population, were watching the launch live on TV due to payload specialist Krista McAuliffe, the first teacher in space. The media coverage of the explosion was extensive. The study reveals that 85% of the Americans questioned had heard of the accident within the hour. The whole world was in a state of shock, and the whole world mourned and took part in the funerals of the space shuttle victims. The failure of an O-ring gasket of the right-hand side solid fuel booster was the cause of the explosion. The shuttle did not dispose of an ejector seat system, and the impact on the ocean surface was too severe for anyone to survive. The catastrophe led to a 32-month pause in the NASA shuttle program, and by appointment of President Ronald Reagan. Second, Michael John Smith, pilot. Third, Ronald McNair, mission specialist. Fourth, Ellison Onzuka, mission specialist. Fifth, Judith Resnick, mission specialist.
6th, Gregory Jarvis, payload specialist. 7th, Krista McAuliffe, payload specialist. And now, the unbelievable. A well-known proverb says, if something looks like a duck, sounds like a duck, and behaves like a duck, then it probably is a duck. For a second time, this matter leaves the world breathless. Though this latest chalk even surpassed you. First, Francis Richard Scobie, commander of the Space Shuttle Challenger.
Francis Richard Scobie, born May 19, 1939, commander of the Space Shuttle Challenger. Exactly 30 years after the Challenger crashed, he was spotted as a CEO of Cows and Trees, which was, and today still is, a marketing advertising agency in Chicago. When you take a look at these two pictures, you can see at least three features that show a strong resemblance. First, the same high forehead and the same eyebrows, and also the eyes facing slightly downwards at their outer corners. And all this always with his middle name Richard and the same age. You can find the picture on the right side, also on his LinkedIn page. When visiting the Cows and Trees website, which I've opened here, you come across an animation with a rocket-driven cow. And the dust swirled around forms the number 6. The whole thing reminds strongly the Space Shuttle Challenger on TV when it exploded in midair. Just how black would such a humor be?
Michael J. Smith, pilot of the Challenger.
Born on the 13th of April 1945, pilot of the Challenger. Michael J. Smith, 41 years old when he lost his life 30 years ago because of the explosion. The man on the picture to the right also bears the name Michael John Smith, and he's exactly 30 years older now. The resemblance with the astronaut Michael John Smith is striking. The same horizontal eyebrows, the same gray-blue eyes, the same vertical indentation on the tip of his nose. We are talking of an emeritus professor for industry and system engineering at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Michael John Smith email address is mjsmith@k.wisc.edu.
Third, Ronald McNair, mission specialist of the Challenger. Born on October 21st, 1950, Ronald McNair was the second Afro-American astronaut with a doctor's degree in physics. The 66-year-old Carl McNair on the right looks just as Ronald would look today. One day, this fact attracted the attention of some American citizens. When addressing him about the astonishing resemblance, it is said that he responded spontaneously that he was the twin brother of the killed astronaut. As the resemblance was more than striking in every aspect, some fellow citizens began to doubt this assertion. Because they did not just want to put out empty allegations, they began to investigate. Previously, it was not known that the late Ronald McNair had a twin brother. However, there was a lot to discover about Carl McNair. For example, that he is an author, an educational consultant, and an inspired speaker. That he is the founder and retired president of the Ronald E. McNair Foundation, which he had established in honor of his deceased brother. One detail, however, could not be clarified at the time of that investigation. There are no indications for a twin brother of Ronald McNair named Carl from before 1986. Here's the report of the research of a free journalist.
On Ancestry.com, I have performed a search for Carl McNair, who claims to be the brother of the astronaut Ronald McNair. Carl S. McNair's LinkedIn page mentions December 16th as his birthday. On Wikipedia, Ronald McNair's parents are Carl C. and Pearl M. McNair. So I searched Ancestry.com for any birth or baptism records for a Carl McNair, born on December 16th, whose whose father is Carl McNair and Pearl McNair, his mother. Search results. In the birth certificates of Texas between 1903 and 1932, there's only the record of Herschel John McNair, born on October 12th in Rosewood, Upshur, whose father's name was William McNair and his mother's was Pearl McNair. In other words, according to Ancestry.com, there's no Carl McNair, brother of Ronald McNair.
Identical twins that never spoke at their funerals. That's the big one. If these people truly did have identical twins, why didn't any of these people speak, give the eulogy, anything at their funerals? But they're still alive today. Think about that.
Wow,
if
that is such a brilliant...
Right? I've never made a video one.
Another mission specialist of the Challenger, Alison Onizuka, was the first Japanese-American astronaut. He too was supposed to have shown up in public after the Challenger catastrophe. When asked how on earth he could still be alive, he supposedly defended himself, pretending to be Claude, the twin brother of the deceased astronaut Alison Onizuka. As his assertion was not seen to be credible, some fellow citizens set out for research about a twin brother of the astronaut. The astronaut Alison Onizuka was born in Hawaii on the 24th of June. At the time of that research, there was no birth register containing a twin brother, Claude. Claude allegedly claimed to be the younger brother of Alison Onizuka. If Alison was still alive today, he would look exactly like his younger brother Claude on this picture. The same eyebrows, same eyes, same crow's feet wrinkles, same nose, even the same hair parting. Claude Onizuka is a board member of the Department of Liquor Control, County of Hawaii, Hilo, Hawaii.
Resulting from another more extensive research by an eyewitness.
I also asked Ancestry.com to search for the birth records of a Claude Onizuka, the alleged brother of the astronaut Alison Onizuka. According to Wikipedia's entry on Alison Onizuka, his father was the late lamented Masamitsu Onizuka. His mother is Mitsu Onizuka. Result of the search: your search for Claude Onizuka returned 0 good matches. Here's the screenshot of the birth register. Just to be sure, I redid the search for Claude Onizuka, this time without specifying the names of the parents. There were 36 results, none of which was Claude Onizuka. In other words, according to Ancestry.com, at the time of this research, no one named Claude Onizuka had ever been born in the United States.
Fifth, Judith Resnick, mission specialist of the Challenger.
Judith Arlene Resnick, born on April 5th, 1949. What of importance can be said about her? With a PhD in electrical engineering, she was a mission specialist of the Challenger. She was the second female American astronaut and the first Jewish American astronaut to fly in space. And now comes the interesting part. At Yale Law School, there is a chair held by a professor named Judith Resnick. The same name, this may occasionally happen. However, not only is it remarkable that now she is exactly 30 years older than the astronaut Judith Resnick when she was killed. She has exactly the same name, the same appearance, and the same voice as the deceased astronaut. And what is she doing at the Yale Law School? She's a professor of law for the Arthur Lehman program. Now, let's return to compare the pictures. Like the astronaut Judith Resnick, this professor has dark, curly hair, dark eyes, the same shaped eyebrow, and the same lines on both sides of the face extending up from the jaw. What else can we see? Their mouth, the way they look, and their gestures are exactly the same. Here is another picture to compare. Look here at her mouth. The upper lip of both Judith Resnick's form a slight peak when they speak. Do you see this? And is all this at random or coincidental? Hereinafter, two elaborate investigations are presented about Judith Resnick as witness reports. Whoever compares the voices of astronaut Judith Resnick 30 years ago, along with Professor Judith Resnick, comes to the conclusion it's about one and the same woman. So let's finally listen to this voice comparison. Judith Resnick before and after 30 years.
Well, I too am glad to be here one more time, and I am hoping that the affliction that Steve Hawley had from the 41D mission specialist of the delays hasn't rubbed off on me. And
there were fewer than 40 federal judges around the United States, and they didn't need a building of their own. They were tucked into facilities like this. And, of course, what the U.S. government did was this was a form of tax, and marine hospitals, health care.
And I think the guys behind me are hoping that it hasn't also. Otherwise, they might throw me.
Of course, is the Civil War, and with the Civil War and the North conquest of the South.
Otherwise, they might throw me off the flight.
The U.S. federal government owned
and I will now introduce
about 50 buildings
around the entire
hoping that it has
United States. They might throw me off the flight.
Are all these inconsistencies pure coincidences, or is it about a worldwide deception of enormous proportions?
Have my mic turned off, sorry about that. Let's go a little bit further. If you search for Judith Resnick, Yale, this is what comes up on Google. This is, so I verified she is a Yale Law School professor. And I went ahead and verified as well how many of me, which you can go out and go to the website and type in your name and see how many there are. There is exactly one Judith Resnick. There's 928 people in the U.S. with the last name of Resnick. There's 488,000 in the with the first name of Judith. But there's no one. There's only one person in the U.S. with the name of Judith Resnick. So I did an overlay of Judith, the astronaut, and Judith, the Yale professor, and I had to flip. I couldn't find a picture, you know, with good enough clarity. So I flipped the one I found. But you can see, look at the teeth. The teeth are almost identical, even having been flipped. And you can see the jawline fits, everything fits. The nose fits. You know, I didn't get it lined up absolutely perfect because it's not quite the same angle. It's a similar angle, but the teeth is what I was most concerned with, and you can see the teeth lined up just about perfect. If I could have got that other side, I think it would have been absolutely identical. And if that wasn't enough, here's a side by side, right? You can see here they were both looking straight on. You can see it's the exact same, you know. Where's the hair the same curly hair, the same nose, you know, obviously our facial features, our nose never quits growing, right? But she's still got the same nose. She has the same jaw, she has the same lips, it's the same, you know, I don't know how you can come to any other conclusion that it's not the same person. So I just wanted to put all this in one place. I thought that was all the most compelling evidence to make this case. So I wanted to put it all in one place. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and take care.